Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this edition of Voice of CIO. Today, we have Larry Wolff, the founder and CEO of Wolff Strategy Partners, a boutique consulting firm specialized in enterprise strategy management and digital transformation. Larry, over the last 3 decades, has played several roles being of CEO, Chief Operation Officer, Chief Information Officer, CTO, Chief Digital Officer, and Management Consultant for public, private, and international and emerging growth companies. So it's extremely great to see you, Larry. Thanks for joining us and ready to share your insights today.
Thank you, Suresh. I'm thrilled to be with you. Let's do it.
Exactly. So let's kind of kickstart with, you frequently refer to the term called IT value journey. So can you explain what does that mean for users so that we have a common understanding of what do you mean by IT value journey?
Certainly. Great question. So, I've been running IT organizations and IT strategy for, as you mentioned, a very long time. And early on, we started doing IT strategic plans and realized that there was a pattern, there was sort of a theme in the evolution of an IT organization. And I eventually termed that the IT value journey. And I'll actually share a screen and show an image of it.
Sure.
And the IT value journey is something that every IT organization goes through.
Right.
And if you think about it, we do three things in IT. We maintain stuff, we maintain the systems and the infrastructure, and we also enhance, we try to keep up with the business needs. And then eventually we earn the privilege to transform the business. And I would say that with the thousands, literally thousands of CIOs that I've spoken with over the years, believe it or not, about 80% of IT organizations are still in that maintain state where it's break fix, it's keep the lights on. And the challenge is, how do you evolve into that enhanced stage, eventually the transform stage? Now, a lot of folks have written and spoken on the topic of how you mature IT. And they talk about things like when you're in the maintain stage, you get good at project management and business relationship management and maybe requirements gathering and customer service. And they think that that's what moves you up to the enhanced state. And then in the enhanced state, you start creating value, you're keeping up with the business needs, and you're enabling growth. And that enables you to move to the transform state. But what's really happening, and this is key, and you'll hear me say this a lot, is that as we get better at these different processes, we're really earning the trust, credibility, and respect from our business colleagues. That's what enables us to move up along the IT value journey. So it's not that we got good at customer service and project management, it's that people trust us and we have credibility and they respect us and they look to us more to keep up with the evolving business needs. And we get really good at that. We earn the opportunity to transform the business. So the IT value journey is really an evolution that every IT organization goes through. We move at different paces. Some stay in that maintain state for years and years and years. I've done numerous IT turnarounds, and we've gone through this process in mid-market companies in as little as 18 months. Other companies take years. And so the idea is that as we get better at the things that we do, we earn the trust, credibility, and respect from the business. That enables us to deliver greater business value.
Excellent. So in the IT value journey, when you emphasized on measuring the value of IT, how does a CIO do that? I mean, is there any kind of a blueprint that you would advise? Because that's a value is being very subjective. So how do you play that when it comes to CIO to demonstrate value to the business? How does it work?
Right. That's a great question, because I was shocked to learn over the years that most IT organizations are not measuring the value they deliver. And I'll give a really short story. After 9/11, around 9/11, I was working for a huge global company. Our US division was based out of New York City, And we were, pretty impacted by the events of 9/11. And of course, revenue, disappeared and sales opportunities were just vanishing. And there were 10 of us that ran this company, the CEO and 10 leaders. And at some point, the CEO came to us and said, I need everybody to take 10% out of your budget. And so we said, come back next week, tell me what you're going to do. So we come back next week, we're sitting in the boardroom and we're going around the table and everybody's saying how they're going to take 10% out of their budget. It comes to me as the CIO. And I said, look, guys, all of our metrics, our service levels, what we're doing with software development and products, et cetera. I said, so here's what we can do. We can take our service from here to here and save this much, from here to here and save this much. And before I got the third option out, one of the executive vice presidents stood up at the table, addressed the group and said, we're all struggling to generate revenue. IT is the only one that's putting money on the bottom line. Why don't we take an extra 1% out of our budgets and leave IT alone? Of course, my jaw drops and without debate, everybody agrees. I was just blown away. But the reason that happened was because we had been measuring IT all along to the point that the CFO was certifying the tens of millions of dollars a year that IT was contributing to the bottom line. So how do you do that? I kind of look at IT measurement in I guess 4 categories. Let's start with the simplest. I won't go into a lot of detail, but let's start with the simple one. IT customer service. 80% of the business thinks that the help desk is IT because that's who they interact with. So let's start with IT customer service. And the question for every CIO is, how do I improve the level of service while lowering the cost of delivering that service? And we know that there's things we do, pushing call resolution from tier 3 to tier 2, from tier 2 to tier 1. There's various processes.
Like chatbots and self-service and whatnot.
Exactly.
Shift left, yeah? So all of those.
Exactly. And so we should always be concentrating and measuring what's our level of service, what's our customer satisfaction rate, and what's our unit cost, what's our total cost of ownership, however we measure it, and those should be moving in opposite directions. The second one is the infrastructure. How do we measure the infrastructure? Probably one of the most important ways today is resiliency. How long does it take to detect a threat? How long does it take to remediate it? And can we keep lowering those numbers? Simple to measure, relatively simple to measure, but most organizations don't. A lot of IT organizations talk about uptime. Who cares? I don't care if your servers are up. I care if the service that I'm using is available when I'm doing that big sales presentation, right? And so measuring availability of core systems is also key. And what we advise people is take your worst performing metric. Maybe there's an old homegrown system that's down a lot, but a lot of other things are up, almost 100% of the time. Take your worst performing system, make that your baseline, and then continuously improve it. And if you're thinking about this concept of continuous improvement, we'll talk more about that, then no matter where you start, good, bad, or indifferent, as long as you keep getting better. Software development, another important thing to measure. How many, a lot of people are using agile methodology now, right? Most are struggling with their agile transformation. But in the agile methodology, how do we get good at measuring velocity? How do we get to the point where we can do, 1 or 2 more story points per sprint? And are we looking at quality? One of the most important measures in software development is, where am I finding bugs? If I'm finding bugs in unit testing, that's a blessing. That's wonderful. If I'm finding bugs after we've gone to production, that's super expensive. Right. And so we want to be measuring these and again, continuous improvement. The final thing on
the improving the lead time and cycle time, which typically people tend to, how quickly can you ship new features from the time that you get into a backlog to its deployment, but also the quality of detecting earlier, because the cost of rework is going to be so much detrimental.
Exactly. And it's okay to accumulate technical debt as long as you go back and fix it. And a lot of people forget about that too. So great point. So the last piece of IT measurement that I like to focus on is project return on investment, ROI. And the reason that's important And this may shake some people up, but to me, there's no such thing as an IT project. If it's an infrastructure upgrade, if it's a system that we're building, a product, we're only doing it for the benefit of the business. And so there's no such thing as an IT project, which means by definition, every project should have an executive sponsor,
Right.
who is a direct report of the CEO that can approve time, scope, and budget and approve changes. And when we initiate a project, we ask the sponsor and the business owner to commit to the value of that project. If we do this thing, we're going to generate $1 billion of new revenue, or we're going to save $100 million a year. Or in a smaller company, maybe in the thousands or hundreds of thousands, it doesn't matter. By getting that commitment and then looking at the estimated cost of IT delivering whatever it is, we can establish a value proposition. Now, a lot of IT organizations are not capitalizing their development efforts, but they should, US based, right? And so if you're capitalizing, that means you have to meet with accounting or finance at least once a year, probably quarterly, maybe monthly, and talk about, hey, this thing that we created, and you said it was going to create this much value, is it still performing that way? And if it is, we'll continue to amortize it. Right. And we can measure then the value. IT invested X dollars to make this happen, and the business is accumulating this much value from it. If we stop accumulating value, we're going to write off the remainder of that investment, and it changes the picture. So these are very simple measures to determine the value that IT is creating for the business. And when you measure those, and for most people, the first year, you're just getting baselines. Be patient, measure, start. Doesn't matter where you are, just find a number and keep improving. And when you communicate that value to the rest of the business, trust, credibility, respect all start rising. IT gets to play a bigger role.
Excellent. That's a great way to kind of portray about this whole journey. Now, you have been passionate about IT strategy management. Now, please give us a quick overview of what does that IT strategy management talk about?
Sure. So back in the late 90s, doctors Kaplan and Norton from Harvard wrote the Balanced Scorecard.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I'm not a big reader, but I read that book over the weekend, one summer weekend, and I couldn't put it down. It just resonated. I came in Monday morning. I showed the book to my team. I said, you're getting a copy of this tomorrow. You will read it by the end of the week because Monday we start doing this. And we started using the Balanced Scorecard methodology, and we were getting some amazing results. But and that's strategic planning, right? What we realized is that strategy without execution is just a dream.
Right.
And so we bridged the gap to, okay, I've got a great strategy, but how do I make sure that I execute it effectively? And what we created was an 8-step process. We've been using this for ages. And I'm going to share my screen again, and I'll show you a quick picture of this. It's an 8-step process that ensures that we execute on the strategy, right? So let's take a look at that. Hopefully you can see this. And I'll go through these quickly. I won't go into a lot of detail, but at the very top, every strategy starts with what I call 5 filters. It creates a boundary around your strategy. What's your mission? IT organizations should have a mission. What's your vision? What do we think we can be? What do we want to be in 10 years? What are our core values? What are those things that we will not compromise for the sake of more prestige, more budget, whatever. But then, even more importantly, who is our client? It used to be the internal business partners. Now it's often the consumer. And so let's really understand who our client is, what their needs are. And then finally, and I love this one, how do we differentiate? We could outsource any aspect of IT. Why should we keep it in-house? We should only keep it in-house if it's creating a sustainable competitive advantage by differentiating from what the outsourced players can do. So those 5 filters create a boundary, and then we build a strategy map, our strategic objectives at a high level. What are those things that we want to accomplish? And we'll break it into the themes of along the IT value journey: maintain, enhance, transform. And early on, we might be heavily weighted in maintain with nothing happening in transform. But as a few years go by, maintain is taking less and less of our time and budget because we're better at it. We're doing more enhancements and starting more transformation. We take our strategic objectives and translate them into measurable goals, smart objectives, pretty straightforward. And then I'd love to go down to the staff, whether it's corporate strategy or IT strategy, go down to the people that do the job every day and say, hey, here's what we're trying to achieve. How can we make this happen? They will come up with action plans that will blow your mind every time. That is kind of where strategic planning ends. So let's bridge this into execution. What good is it to have plans if we don't resource it? Most organizations get 6 months into the year and realize we don't have the bodies to finish all this. And, poor Suresh is working, 100 hours a week, and that's not sustainable. So after we create our action plans, we resource them and figure out where we run out of resources. And then because we've done ROI analysis, right, on the things that the business wants to do, we can look at those resources and say, hey, if we hire more people, contract people, outsource, we can still get these done and still be profitable. So we move that line lower, and then eventually we run out of resources. That's where we draw the line. Once we've resourced our action plans, it makes sense to build those into people's individual performance objectives for the year. So now they're being measured on what really is in the strategy, and it aligns the whole organization. And then program management. I like to have, whether it's IT or enterprise, one program manager that oversees all of the strategic initiatives. And so it might just be collecting critical milestones and tracking them, knowing that if this initiative starts falling short, it has a domino effect on these 3 others that are dependent on it. And so maybe we should slow down, pull back, hold the investment, and really manage it. And then last but certainly not least is communication, which is really a wrapper around all of this. Your strategy and your execution are not effective unless there's constant communication. And the key to communication is that we're communicating similar messages in very different ways for different levels. So the project team, the rank and file in the organization, executive leadership, the board, they all need the same information, but they need to digest it in ways that are tailored to them. So I'll stop sharing at that point, but that's kind of an overview of IT strategy management. It also works at the enterprise level.
Excellent. I love the 8-step model. It kind of makes it people to bring to a holistic life cycle rather than just looking at a piecemeal approach. Going on to that and building that continuous improvement. You've been a big fan of continually improving the journey because it's like what Martin Luther King says. It's a journey, right? You have to first know how to crawl before you can walk and run. So it's a journey, and it takes time. But how do you build that continuous improvement as a culture when you are a CIO? Part of the organization, because it's not going to be just one person driving it. It has to be everybody is integral part of thinking and acting like one among them. So how do you make that as a habit or a culture within as part of the CIO driving it?
That's a hugely important question. I'm glad you brought that up. I said earlier that when you start measuring, it doesn't matter if you're good, bad, or somewhere in between. You just have to start measuring. And all that anybody cares about is that you're improving. The business doesn't care that our customer service is terrible. The business cares that we're improving it. And so in order to build continuous improvement into the culture of the organization, there's a few things that have to happen. First of all, the CIO has to live it, breathe it, believe it, and it's got to pour out of your veins, which means we talk about it all the time, like literally every day. But then we mentioned in the strategy map, in the 8-step strategy cycle, that we take the action plans, we resource them, and we put that into people's performance objectives. Well, continuous improvement should be in everybody's individual performance objectives. People perform to what they're measured on, and certainly perform to what they're compensated on. And so by taking the entire IT strategy is about continuous improvement. How are we going to get better at these different things in order to deliver better service? And different people own the delivery of those, right? Throughout, the CIO owns the strategy, but the CIO is probably not doing any of the hands-on work. There's a bunch of vice presidents, they're not doing any of it. They're directors, managers. Eventually, everybody in the organization has to have performance objectives that are based on continuous improvement of the area that they're responsible for. Whether it's personally, I'm a help desk agent, and so customer satisfaction on the tickets that I'm closing better go up by a little bit every year. Or I'm a developer, and am I developing more reliable code faster, right? So these aren't difficult things to do, and you can't let it get out of hand, right? You got to keep it relatively simple and in terms that are meaningful to the business. But that continuous improvement has to emanate from IT leadership and has to be built into everybody's performance objectives.
Great. My last question was, a lot of times these days we see non-technical CIOs rising. So what is the kind of, what can you say to the non-technical CIOs who have not had that technology background, understanding, and with all the disruption with Agile, DevOps, Lean, service management, all in place, how do they actually tackle this to be a better CIO? Is that going to be a disadvantage, or do you think because more and more people get to that space, but we'll be really, and you are a big proponent of making that. So what's your idea around this non-technical CIO?
Yeah, fantastic question. We actually started writing a series on this. I think we're a couple articles in. It might become another handbook. But so a little background and then some guidance. A few things have happened. I've mentioned in this discussion a few times this concept of trust, credibility, and respect. Why did we start bringing CIOs from other parts of the business instead of promoting from within IT? Well, perhaps, I'm just throwing this out there, perhaps it's because the other IT leaders did not develop the trust and the credibility and the respect from the business. They're talking bits and bytes. They're talking, in language that the business executives don't understand. And go to any CEO. I do this all the time. Tell me about IT. The universal answer is takes too long, costs too much. They don't understand it because it's not being communicated in terms of business value. The other thing that I've coached tons of CEOs on is that you don't have to understand technology, but better understand the value that technology can create for your business. And the reason we're seeing non-technical business leaders taking over IT is because today, more and more people are, let's call it tech savvy. They don't necessarily understand the technology, but they understand that, hey, predictive modeling should be able to help us sort our sales leads better and reduce costs. Or, perhaps we can create an app for our customers to do whatever. They understand what technology can do, even if they don't know how to do it. And so those are the people that are most capable of creating an IT strategy and creating a vision and coaching people through. Now, the non-technical CIO better trust their team, and you can weed that out pretty quick. I mean, I've seen plenty of people trying to, get budget for, the new data center. It's like, didn't we just do this last year, right? So we don't have to really go crazy with that. But let me share another screen, and I'll show you some of the guidance that we're giving the non-technical CIO.
Sure.
So this was in a recent article, and if you think about it, whether you're technical or non-technical, I think these are the major roles around the perimeter of this, the major roles of the CIO. Rallying the team around a vision, simply getting people to understand and believe what IT can actually do for the business. I've been in some tough organizations where for the last 15 years, I've just been keeping the lights on, and to get the IT team to realize that there's so much more we can be doing to create value for the business, it takes a little while for them to trust that, but it's critical that you have that vision. And then, as we mentioned before, develop a strategy, but make sure you can execute that strategy. So that 8-step process that we talked about. Be able to delegate, especially if you're the non-technical CIO, you've got to delegate everything. Leaders should be delegating anyway. Long story on that. Measure, measure, measure. We talked about IT measurement. That's what helps the team improve and helps the company understand what IT is doing. And be there to coach. I'm not gonna coach a programmer on, object-oriented methodology, but I am gonna coach them on, little things like, hey, don't you think that 80% of our code should be like error detecting and handling, and maybe 20%? You see different things, and you can just ask the questions, and without being a technical trainer, just from a leadership perspective, you can guide people and they will figure it out. It's not our responsibility to tell them how to do things. It's our responsibility to challenge them and give them the confidence and let them grow. And then communication within IT, around the company. And when the non-technical CIO does all this, right smack in the middle of this diagram, they're building that trust, credibility, and respect. They're communicating with the business in financial terms, not technology terms. Speak the language that the rest of them speak. Build that trust, credibility, and respect, and then it becomes contagious. IT gets excited because now we're being asked to do more and more cool things because we're able to demonstrate the value that we're creating for the business. So that's kind of like a quick overview, but I think it's critically important. And it's good that we're getting business folks into IT leadership.
Well, I like the way that you do a storytelling about making everything towards that boxes. And you have been a big proponent of sharing a lot of these best practices on your website, on the CIO handbook. So tell us, for viewers, what made you to get through this one? And can everybody get a copy of the CIO handbook going to your website?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's how you and I actually connected, right, through the CIO handbook. I write articles every week, and we've got thousands of followers, which is wonderful. And I learned so much from them. And so I struggled every week to come up with a concept, right? What am I going to write about this week? I got a mental block. And so I started doing themes. I did a theme around, IT strategy management, and a theme around the CIO handbook. And we were a couple of articles in, and somebody contacted me and said, where can I get a copy of the CIO handbook? They're like, well, it doesn't exist. It's just articles, but I'd be happy to package them and give them to you when we're done. And we ended up getting just dozens and dozens of requests. And so we said, well, why don't we just package this and make it available? So there's a landing page, but if you go, I'll bring up a graphic. If we go to wolffstrategy.com,
right,
and there it is, down at the bottom, wolffstrategy.com, right on the home page, right at the top, is a graphic for the CIO handbook. You click on it, it takes you to the landing page, name and email address, and download the handbook. It's been met with just amazing response. I really like it. And I welcome everybody to just go get your copy and share your feedback. I love to hear what people have to say. I get great comments on LinkedIn. We get great emails back. I've had some of the most amazing conversations with lots and lots of our readers, and we always learn from each other. So it's a joy to be able to do that.
Excellent, Larry. I think you have actually shared your all real-world experience and practical nuggets of wisdom. Thank you so much for today, taking your time and explaining this whole journey. And I'm sure that all our viewers will get inspired about that CIO and how they can do it better. And I look forward to talking to you again sometime soon. Thank you so much for your valuable time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. And I think this is going to be a great series that you've started.
Thank you.